Welcome in to the Dawg Dispatch Live. John Smith, your host. Coach, we are doing it live today.
Yes, sir, we are.
Man, what? It's been a while since we've done it live.
It's been a minute.
It has been a minute. But figured Sunday afternoon, we'll go live. We'll talk to the people. We'll address some of the controversy that I feel like is swirling around UGA football this offseason. You know what I love about the controversy that's swirling around UGA this offseason?
What's that? Give it to me.
It's coming after winning an SEC championship and making a college football playoff.
Wow.
At one point, I was curious. This was probably I guess it was 2012, 2013, when Nick Saban was winning national championships at Alabama. And I was curious. I was so curious. How would the Georgia fan base react to this much winning? Right? Would we be a fan base that is appreciative of the winning, a fan base that had went 41 years without a national championship and you finally get one and, all these things? Or would we turn into Alabama? And I think a lot of our fan base, not the majority, mostly the Fire Bobo guys on Twitter have Alabama-itis. These guys have Bama-itis. They become like the Alabama fans who, if you don't win a national championship every single year, it's a failure. You should, I had one guy say Georgia should be a top 3 offense in the country nationally every year.
Yeah.
When Ohio State hired Chip Kelly, which I'll talk about in a second, but Ohio State hired Chip Kelly, they scored 10 points on Michigan, Coach.
Yes.
Lost the football game. 21 points on that Nebraska team.
Yep.
20 points without even an offensive touchdown against Penn State. But Chip Kelly, that's because Ohio State, because they caught fire in the playoff, because they spent $20 million on their roster, and because they went out and won the thing. Kudos to them. Congratulations. All of a sudden it's there's no reason why you couldn't just go hire a new offensive coordinator and win a national championship. Look at Chip Kelly. So, Coach, before we get into that, folks who are joining us, if you're on Twitter, if you're on YouTube, hit us up in the chat. We want to talk about this today. We want to address whatever feelings you have, whatever questions you have, if it's related to the Georgia offense or not. If it's related to, we'll talk about Georgia baseball. We'll talk about whatever you want to talk about today. But before we get into that, like, subscribe, Coach. How have things been going? You've been breaking down a lot of tape. You've been looking at a lot of things. Give me your perspective just on, really we'll start with just on kind of this overall vibe and feeling that we're getting, like I said, from a vocal minority, in my opinion, but this vibe and feeling that we're getting from these, what I call the Fire Bobo guys.
John, I'm doing great, buddy. It's been a great week looking into a lot of new recruits, seeing the potential of our guys that are up and rising. But, I got a firsthand seat to a lot of those guys you were talking to through X and, just sort of got my popcorn, sat back and laughed because you're right. It's really, to me, almost delusional how people can think that just because we're going to get rid of somebody and bring somebody else in, that all of a sudden just changes the entire context of what we're going to be doing next year. There's got to be some solidification and consistency with what we're doing. And honestly, I feel like in a sense there was some handcuff positions taking place because these guys just all of a sudden didn't forget how to coach. I'll even go another level of that strata that you're talking about with the ones who are equally wanting to see Stacy Searles fired. Stacy Searles had a lot of these guys, if you think about it from a standpoint at the offensive tackle position, which is where we struggled at this year. And you think about it last year, for example, you have a Marius Mims, Cedric Van Granger. You got, one of the most consistent linemen that we had both these last 2 years in Tate Ratledge. And you have Dylan Fairchild, who was solid. And then you got Xavier Truss. Last year, I'm cussing Truss the entire year, and it was for a reason. He was the only one not producing that consistent flow. Same thing goes, if you look at the tackles over Kirby Smart's tenure at the University of Georgia, through Pittman, Luke, and now Searles, we have had a generational tackle at either one or both spots. If you look at, Broderick Jones, if you look at, Andrew Thomas, if you look at McClendon, you look at Isaiah Wilson. I know he was a bust in the NFL, but his potential was really good. And then you got Amarius Mims, who just went to the Bengals. I mean, if you think about it, can we say that about what our talent looks like at the tackle level right now? When we're, seeing Monroe Freeling, who's coming off shoulder surgery. We've got, Ernest Green III, to me, who digressed this year. And you've got Xavier Truss, who I cussed all last year, who probably was the most productive tackle for us and consistent tackle for us all year long. So, it comes down to the fact of looking at all of the different perspectives that you have. And Coach Smart does his job. He does his homework. I know him and Mike have sat down in office. They've talked about, hey, man, do you not think that they don't sit there and talk about, hey, these are the things we've got to do dynamically to change this year, to evolve our offense around the potential of athletes that we've got coming in. So, yeah, I'm right there with you. It's really a struggle bus when you have a coach that's not necessarily thinking that we can just throw them under the bus because we've got to have somebody to blame. But when realistically your guys are not going out there and performing, it's really hard when you dial up plays, which I watched him do all year long, and guys drop passes, and you guys right tackle doesn't take care of the edge play, and our quarterback doesn't step up in the pocket, and they work on those things daily. And that's just the difference of the execution level. So, I really, in this case, cannot say anything one way or the other. I'm accepting the fact that I've learned to trust Coach Smart, and he's going to do what's best for his program going forward. And if Mike Bobo is our OC next year, I'm going to stick with him and hope that he can, do those things necessary to step his game up with what we're going to be doing, play calling for the offense next year.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm going to do a little bit of a monologue here. So bear with me because I have been, probably one of the more vocal ones on Twitter against the firing of Mike Bobo to the guys who continually call for his firing. But here's my opinion, right, on the Georgia 2024 offense. The Georgia 2024 offense was abysmal. Period. It just was. The Georgia 2024 offense was one of the worst offenses that I've seen under Kirby Smart. The Georgia 2024 offense, you mentioned it, had 665 yards worth of drops. The 2024 offense had, was 102nd in the nation in rushing, averaged somewhere around, just abysmal. Averaged somewhere around 30 points a game, which again, abysmal. Just not great, top to bottom. It was bad. My opinion on Mike Bobo and Stacey Searles is that 2024 was the exception, not the rule, until proven otherwise.
Right.
If you go back and look across the career of these guys, every coach, if you coach, this, coach, and you can speak to it for the people. If you coach longer than, half a second, you're going to have ups and downs. You're going to have bad seasons, right? And I'm going to give you an example. A guy who had some ups and downs and who had some bad seasons, Todd Monken. Todd Monken, when he got to Georgia, he came to Georgia in 2020 after being fired by the Cleveland Browns.
By the Browns, yeah.
The Browns paid him, believe it or not. The Browns were still paying him in 2020 and 2021 while he was coaching at Georgia.
Yeah.
He got fired from the Cleveland Browns. He got fired from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is a guy who, coming in was not – yes, he had some success at Oklahoma State a long time ago. Like people like to say that about Mike Bobo too, right? Like he had some success a long time ago, but it's always, ups and downs. It's a play calling situation. Todd Monken came into the situation in Georgia. And again, I know it was COVID. I know you had Jamie Newman quit on the team 2 weeks before the season started and all of that stuff. But Todd Monken was the guy who rolled Dwan Mathis out there and said, this is our best option at quarterback.
Yep.
Right. And then when Stetson Bennett, went down and was out there like just balling, saved Georgia versus Arkansas, did not play great, candidly. But JT Daniels got healthy. JT Daniels got rolled out there. JT Daniels threw for 400 yards. And what did we think? Oh, here's the savior of Georgia football.
Right.
Here's the guy, right? Going into 2021, Stetson Bennett was third on the depth chart behind Carson Beck and JT Daniels. And so that's Todd Monken's decision. And so at the end of the day, every coach, I think there's a lot of revisionist history when you have a guy who was an OC who won 2 national championships as an offensive coordinator, back-to-back national championships. There's some revisionist history to say this guy was head and shoulders above. Why are we keeping this guy? We're only keeping this guy because he's friends with Kirby Smart and all these other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at the 2023 offense that was under Mike Bobo and Stacey Searles, the 2023 offense averaged 191 rush yards per game with Dejan Edwards. Kendall Milton was hurt a good bit of the year. And then it was run back by committee. It was Roderick Robinson,
Robinson.
Mm-hmm. Brock Bowers was getting handoffs. I mean,
mm-hmm.
in 2023, there was no Zeus. There was no James Cook. There was no Kenny McIntosh. That's who Todd Monken was working with in 2021. And Mike Bobo, Todd Monken was also working with a better offensive line, candidly, in 2021. And Mike Bobo averaged more rush yards per game and more yards per carry, Mike Bobo and Stacey Searles, in 2023 than Todd Monken did in 2021.
Yep.
Period. He also averaged more points per game in 2023 than Todd Monken did in 2021. Now, people will say, well, Florida State, the opt-outs and the 63 points. I mean, he put up 51 against a then-ranked Kentucky team, put up 52 against a then-ranked Ole Miss team that won 10 games, put up 30 against a good Mizzou team, put up 38 against Tennessee, who was ranked at the time that Georgia played them in 2023. And so people can say whatever, all these things about like, well, why? But Mike Bobo, for all intents and purposes, established a better offense in 2023 than Todd Monken was able to do in 2021, period. And, people, I think there's just this revisionist history because the Alabama game. So people say, well, yeah, but Georgia didn't beat Alabama. Georgia lost the SEC championship. Mike Bobo's offense has played Alabama twice. He scored 24 points in the SEC championship game. Do you remember the 2021 SEC championship game? Georgia scored 24 points and got their doors blown off by Alabama. And then in the national championship game, Georgia was losing, couldn't do anything on offense until late in the third quarter, was losing in the fourth quarter. Again, Mike Bobo, and again, Alabama last year, I get it. Not a great Alabama team. But he went out there and put up 34 points. More points than Todd Monken was ever able to put up against Alabama. So at the end of the day, I think there's revisionist history when you look at this. And so all I'm saying with this whole diatribe that very few people are probably going to listen to the entire thing. But what I'm saying is that there are going to be times, and by the way, in 2023, Mike Bobo did that with Brock Bowers missing 4 games, with Ladd McConkey out there hobbled on, in a lot of games, Amarius Mims missing time. A lot of key guys on that offense were missing time. And he also, in 2023, Georgia had a 55% third down conversion rate, which was 7 percentage points higher than any offense under Todd Monken. It's 7 percentage points higher than the next highest, which was an offense under Todd Monken at Georgia. The highest in of any team that Kirby Smart has ever had, that third down percentage. So all that to say, 2024 was abysmal. My opinion is it's the exception, not the rule, until proven otherwise. And people are going to bring up Mike Bobo's time at Georgia under Mark Richt, and Mike Bobo's time at Auburn, Mike Bobo's time at South Carolina, and all this other stuff. At the end of the day, Mike Bobo has proven that he can create a national championship level offense. If you look at it compared to what Todd Monken was working with. And he's also proven that I think, it's very hard for any offensive coordinator to overcome the level of, injuries and those types of things. But he's proven that he can get decently creative, at least in 2023, with using personnel. Now, what he hasn't proved, and this is what 2025 is the show me year.
Yep.
He hasn't proved that that he can create consistency in terms of that just killer mentality at the quarterback position that you have with Stetson Bennett. Hasn't proved that, create consistency with especially, the skill players on the outside. Right. And the other thing is I will say, and Coach, I know you have some thoughts on this, so I'll let you talk about it, but
sure.
Using that young personnel, we haven't seen it, right? We see Ohio State got true freshman wide receivers, a couple years in a
Mhm.
row that
Yep.
they've been able to use. And Georgia just hasn't, for whatever reason, their young wide receivers haven't seen the field. So need to see, a lot of that consistency across the board. But I think this whole thing with Todd Monken and Mike Bobo comparison is revisionist history looking through the lens of results that have already been achieved, without taking into account any of the nuance that any of the challenges that Todd Monken had. Because I'll tell you, Georgia was going to lose to Missouri in 2022 if Malachi Starks didn't run that guy down.
Yep.
Georgia only scored 16 points versus Kentucky
Yep.
in 2022 with that Georgia offense.
Mhm.
I mean, there's a number of things that you can point to and say, like, yeah, I mean, Todd Monken, he had the benefit of a consistent offense because he had an experienced quarterback that had a
Yep.
killer mentality, a good offensive line because he had talent like Broderick Jones and some of these other guys.
Mhm.
And he also, I think personally, he was a little bit more creative with the personnel than Mike Bobo has shown to be in his 2 years at Georgia. Coach, now that I have got all of my feelings out,
Mhm.
told everybody the good, the bad, and the ugly, I think 2025 is a show me year for Mike Bobo.
Yeah.
I think the Fire Bobo guys, they can tweet all they want. They can sit out there and, everything. Kirby may wake up. I mean, Kirby's smart. He was in Cabo last week on vacation, so maybe he gets back from vacation and he's like, all right, yep, I'm going to make a change. He could very well fire Mike Bobo. I don't think it's going to happen. People that I talk to don't think it's going to happen.
Mhm.
But who knows? But I will say, if he doesn't, the Fire Bobo guys, I mean, they're going to be there and they're going to be vocal and they're going to be loud. But Kirby Smart, he is keeping Mike Bobo for a reason. Georgia can afford to go out and hire a number of
Mhm.
offensive coordinators. If Kirby
Mhm.
Smart didn't think that Mike Bobo could get the job done, then there would be a change. This whole idea, Paul Feinbaum saying Kirby Smart's being too loyal because Mike Bobo is his friend, these are people who do not know Kirby Smart.
Nope.
Kirby Smart ain't keeping a friend around at the expense of the program. If he didn't think the guy could put together an offense to win a national championship, the guy would not be here, period.
Yep.
Period. Because he has the resources, he has the network, he has the clout, he has everything to bring in any guy that he wants. And so the guy is there because he believes that he can win. Now, Coach,
Mhm.
tell me a little bit, because you were talking to me about this earlier. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts on personnel. Like what's going on? Why can't these young guys, these young skill players at wide receiver especially, why can't they get on the field? What's going on?
We've got to look at, as we move forward, honestly, if we're going to look at this being the make it or break it year that Bobo comes out and does some things differently, is that he's got to be able to talk Coach Smart into this mentality of, I've got to have some of these younger talented kids stepping up and getting a chance to get more reps instead of it always going necessarily to the veterans. Now, I know you may say, well, the veterans are what get it done. The veterans are the ones that can block. The veterans are the ones that can catch. Well, we had the veterans out there last year, and you saw how that execution took place. We've got so much young talent coming up. And the reason why I say that is because it's amazing to me that we always notice defensively, i.e. KJ Bolden this year, a true freshman coming in and being able to play. Now, granted, he's good talent, generational talent that's coming up, very similar to what Malachi Starks did as well. But we've got to start taking those chances on the offensive side of the ball too. If there's something that I would love to see Mike Bobo do, is I would love for him to start using a lot more pre-snap recognition, where you're making defenses be disciplined so that they're out of position when you're basically still wanting to run base concepts, be it you've got so many triggers that they're having to watch and read for, that because of that, it causes them to be one step slower in their read, one step slower in their pass coverage, one step slower to their zone. And that's the make it or break it difference when you have, great talent getting the football in their hands, and the difference of, a foot to 2 feet. My mentality is that you've got to start scheming guys open. And when it comes down to it, I think of people like Sokovia White and Nitro Tuggle. We've seen what they can do a little bit, but it seems to me it's so unfair when you look at, say, KJ Bolden. I mean, he was in the Clemson game immediately. Executing, doing a lot of things.
Malachi Starks in the Oregon game the year before.
Yeah. And it comes down to it. I look at it from that standpoint and I'm going, okay, why in the world are we waiting to the Jacksonville game in Florida, a big game where you got high anticipation, high anxiety levels of being able to go out there and execute? And we're going, okay, Sokobe, we want to get you in there. Now, granted, I know he had played against earlier team. I think he played against the Cupcake team a little bit, but I'm talking about SEC play at the cocktail party, and we're going to put you as a number 2 receiver, and we're going to run the slot fade with you. And that's the only play we're going to give you for that entire game. I just find that to be something that's crucial because, I get it. Some kids just are not ready physically for it. I understand that. But if they've got any sense of going out there and showing out, and we watched it through scrimmages, through tape, and I know they see these guys, I'm just willing to say, let's start taking some chances. I'm going to say, call me the spoon today, because I want to stir the pot and say, come on, Coach Smart, come on, Coach Bobo, come on, whoever can get in there with him and start talking to him and saying, listen, I don't understand when your defense is so difficult to understand and you've got to pick it up to be cerebral and you've got true freshmen starting out there to execute. Why can't we take chances with some of this offensive talent that we've got coming in? If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but at least you give it a chance. You look at it and see what are the possibilities that we have with that kind of talent coming in. A lot of people have already sort of seeded Zachariah Branch and Noah Thomas in as our starting X and H or the slot. And I'm thinking to myself, Sokobe and Nitro have to be in that as well. I'm sure they're going to be saying, I'll be damned. We've been here. This is our spot to take. And, you're going to have to work for it if you're going to be put in that position. But that's the beauty of the offseason. That's the beauty of everybody coming in and getting the opportunity to see what they can do and shine. But I just see a Sokobe White and a Nitro Tuggle that should be executing this year. London Humphreys, I know, is another kid from the portal that we still haven't seen really come to fruition the way we'd like to. But, we've seen what Noah can do. We've seen what Zachariah can do. There is obviously good talent coming in, but it's really hard to know what that talent can do if you never put them out on the field and never give them a chance, because it seems like we're under such a fine microscope with these kids today. And I'm thinking, with everybody wanting to move at a moment's whim, and with everything that's happening with now with NIL and things, it seems like everybody can be just gone in a second. Why are you not playing more freshmen now? Why you can't do the old adage of what you used to, where the more freshmen you started, the more unsuccessful you saw yourself. You needed those veterans, the tenure of those veterans, the people who, had grown and understood SEC play and understood the speed of the game a little bit better, and not playing those freshmen. But in today's time, we don't have that luxury anymore. Kids are leaving to go to the NFL by their junior year, and by the end of their freshman year, if they're not getting an opportunity like an IE Ellis Robinson kid that's out there, I know, chomping at the bits to be put in that position, then why aren't we getting them the chance to do that? Now, the flip side of that coin, you might have a kid that's very undisciplined that I don't see behind the scenes. You might have a kid that goes out during practice and just basically lays an egg every day, or is inconsistently laying eggs every day that we don't see in practice. All we see is that one cut up that we get from a reel somewhere, and we think, my God, why is it? It's just like I remember Michael Jackson III from USC, came from USC, was in the portal. Really never saw the light of day. I think we saw him a little bit in the spring game. Might have saw him a little bit in the Cupcake game earlier in the year. And all of a sudden he puts out this highlight tape of him in practice against the number 1s and the number 2s, and he looks like a world beater out there. And I'm thinking, dude, you have taken 5,000 reps over those however many weeks you've had, and you picked out a select sample of 30 plays, making him look really good. I mean, he's catching balls on our first team defense, things like that. So, it comes down to it. There's a lot of things that go into picking who you're going to put out there and play. But I'm saying, let's challenge them to say, why are we not putting some of your younger bucks out there earlier and letting them get that experience under the lights in the prime time and seeing what they can do going forward?
Yeah, my that's all great, great analysis, and I agree with you. My opinion is, I do think you need to. You got to create an environment. I don't think the Georgia offense was there consistently, like we've already talked about ad nauseum. I don't think the Georgia offense was consistent enough in general to get a lot of those young guys to throw them out there and put them in the fire last year. But you got to have that. Like, you got to have those situations where you put them out there and see what happens. But I think let me take a step back, because I want to be careful what I say, because I do know a lot of folks inside the Georgia program. My knowledge of the way that Kirby Smart thinks, and I'm not saying the way he operates, I'm not saying the way, whatever, but the way maybe philosophically is the right way to put it. My knowledge from folks inside the program, the philosophical way that Kirby Smart thinks about it, right, is he operates under the assumption that guys who come into the Georgia program ultimately want to make it to the NFL. And some of those guys have that ability and have that, just have that build, that makeup, the football IQ, the physicality, all those things to get out there early and play. Other guys need to be developed, and Kirby operates under the Nick Saban model of no NFL scout or GM has come to me and said, how many snaps did they play as a freshman? He said, this is a verbatim quote. He said, you get millions more reps in practice than you ever do in a game. And people come to Georgia because they want to practice against the best. And, I think for him, he's still operating under that, like, development is like, where are you in year 3? Now, the transfer portal has changed, has flipped all of that upside down, right?
Yep, exactly.
Because you do have kids that come in and they want to play, and they are getting developed, and they're going to take that development and go somewhere else, right? And so I think there's a philosophical kind of clash between the way Kirby Smart thinks and the way that things are acting, turning out in reality in college football. But that being said, I do think, I think a lot of the reason that some of these guys don't play also is I do think Kirby Smart wants to reward some of the development. Some of the guys who have, had the blood, sweat, and tears, have put it in, have stayed with the program because he wants those guys to succeed, because then he has other examples of this is what happens when you stay in year 1 and year 2 and you don't come in and expect to play right away. But all that being said, I mean, you got to get some of these young guys out there. We saw it. I'll say this. We saw last year when we saw Anthony Evans and we saw Nitro Tuggle,
right?
Some of those guys get some run at receiver. The first thing that really stood out was they couldn't block. And Nitro Tuggle had a couple drops, and so it's like, it's like, all right, well, maybe there's a reason why they're not getting out there. But that being said, I agree with you. I think either there's an evaluation challenge, or maybe there's too many mouths to feed. I don't know what the situation is, but these young guys, these young skill players especially, got to find a way to get them on the field, because other teams are doing it. Other teams are getting them out there. Other teams are getting them on the field. And some of it is out of necessity, but some of it is just because, like Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State, for example. I mean, the dude, literally a freshman, showed up at the same time as some of these receivers at Georgia. And led that team, in the playoffs, was just torching people, led them to a national championship. So I think your evals have to hit, but you also, you said it, Coach, maybe take your spoon out and stir it up a little. I mean, you got to give some guys some chances.
My thing is that if I ever wanted to try to implement something like that, where I had a really good athlete that may not be doing all the technical things right, and I was trying to figure out a way to say, okay, by God, I'm going to show you and let you go out there and get a little taste, a little dip. And if you come back crying, I understand why. But, at least give them a series. At least let them go out there and have the opportunity to show everything you want to do. Catch a screen, block on a screen, and isolate them on a run play. I mean, on a passing play situation where you're part of the progression. And if you get those things on film, then all of a sudden you can say, this is the reason why you're not out there playing. This is the reason why, because that's the main thing. I'm sitting here kind of talking about in compliance of trying to keep kids happy. And I know necessarily adults to teenagers, that's not necessarily always the case. You play to win. You play and put your best 11, best 22, best 33 out there on the field, depending on, all the 3 phases of the game. And, you're paid to win ball games. Multi-million-dollar, salaries are paid out for this. So it comes down to the fact of, I get it. I understand there's so many intangibles when it comes to who you play and who should be out there doing their job. But I would just like to see the same chances given on the offensive side of the ball of what we've seen in the past with the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think we saw what some of, what could be when you had guys like, Nate Frazier got shoved in there, but out of necessity. But sometimes the guys get shoved in and you see hey, there's a little flash there. So give them a little bit of run. So I like that. Yeah. All right, Coach. Well, that's all unloading all of our thoughts on Mike Bobo, on personnel, on revisionist history, all those things. Happy to continue chatting about this with anybody who would like to join the chat, who would like to chat it up on Twitter. Hit us up. We are going to switch to the other side of the ball real quick, because you've broken down Jalen Walker on your channel. Would love to talk about that with the folks tonight. So tell us a little bit about what we're going to watch here with this this Jalen Walker breakdown.
As the NFL Combine begins to prepare itself, and I know we talked about some of the ones that got snubbed out. Obviously Jalen Walker is not one of them. He has definitely got a high draft potential, but I think one of the ongoing questions or sort of enigma that we've been trying to deal with here is, what do these teams that are going to draft Jalen Walker, what are they looking at him being at? It all depends on defensive scheme. And honestly, he fits the scheme very well to the 3-4 defense that Georgia runs, as well as a team that might be a 4-2-5 who want a traditional 4-man even front. The reason why you see so many 3-4 teams now is because 3-4 can line up symmetrically to anything. And that's why when you have an offense that's multi-diverse, that's highly talented in throwing the football, you pretty much don't get stuck to one side of the ball or the other. So, it all depends on the defensive scheme and the schematic of what they do. But I think he would fit a 3-4 personnel the best. And he would be obviously in a 4-2-5 team as well that's looking to play a lot more nickel without the sound and be that defensive weak side end type. I think he plays the stand-up linebacker at the second level pretty well, but he just didn't have a chance to develop that position while he was at UGA. We got to see glimpses and highlights of it his last year there, but I think when he has got his hand on the ground or he is off the edge, he's got to be moving. He's learned to run that hoop so well. We know what he can do from a rush edge position and what he brings to the table, whether he's on an X stunt or whether he's rushing the edge and getting skinny and running the hoop to get to the quarterback. But even at that linebacker level, to me, where he really excelled was when we brought him on blitzes, when we brought him off, where he'd come up and run the X stunt with CJ or with one of his, his down linemen or anything of that nature. So, my mentality is looking at him from that perspective. I think whoever drafts him needs to draft him as a true edge. And then from there, the problem that arises before we run the film is that everybody was talking about, can he set that edge? There's no doubt in my mind that he can do that. So as John just alluded to, I have broken down just 2 plays here, one specifically where he is down as an edge guy and then where he is at the second level at linebacker level.
All right, well, we're going to run it and we'll be back in just a couple minutes.
Sort of a bastard formation. They got a tight end with trip, so nothing's to the backside weak. So we're in a mince spot right here because I see Malachi over here is the nickel playing strong number 2. So Jalen's over here on the weak side to the play. And you can see our corner sitting here right off the tackle because we're in zone, obviously not man. So he's responsible for either receiver. And what we're going to get here is we're going to get a zone action out of this, but this is an automatic quarterback keep because we're going to run split off of this. So we're going to step down inside like we're blocking zone, but he's going to end up trying to take care of Jalen because quarterback's going to Q's going to pull off of this, and the split is responsible normally to take care of the end, but because it's a guaranteed pull, this is a called play in the huddle, he's actually slipping to take care of whatever shows force-wise to begin with. And, a lot of people have questioned the fact of how well he runs the edge. So what I wanted to do here was to show you this. The tackle is going to step out and try to block. Now, because of this, off of the fake, the split is coming across number 5, okay, not to take. We did a good job of coming off the trips. Raylan Wilson tackling the F-back, and it's immediate pull. This was guaranteed to be pulled right here, okay? So 5, the split guy coming across is going to take care of Dalen Everett, who's doing a great job of forcing, and the one linebacker that's sitting back, CJ, has to make that right, and I'm glad he does decide to get there eventually, but this is all by our defensive line doing a great job. But watch Jalen take on this tackle. A lot of people say that I don't know if he's going to have the ability to take on the edge or keep the edge. I see a hell of a job being done right here by a tackle staying on him being able to get off that block, disconnect from him, and get to the ball carrier. This is just a great job of him on the edge right here on a quarterback keep pull for zone out of split action here. So just show this in full motion. Great job holding his line and getting down the line of scrimmage to make. Okay, at this play right here, I wanted to be able to help you understand a little bit better about him being as a stack backer at the second level instead of being on the defensive front. And the reason why I think this is not the position that he needs to play at the NFL level and why I think he could still be better. He's just more natural at the edge, off the line of scrimmage. The only thing to me that helps him at the linebacker position is that when they send stuff on ball stunts and things like that, where they'll bring this guy down and we'll have a delay by the other guy to fit that. You'll run this guy out and they'll do some kind of stunt in that shape. All right, just to help you understand, Jalen Walker here is at a stand-up linebacker position. And since if you had a defensive lineman that was on the outside shade of the guard, we would call that a 3 technique. At a linebacker level, the outside shade of the guard, that refers to as a 30 technique. So here he is a 30 technique setup. We got a shade, we got a 3, we got a 5. I'm assuming we probably have a 9 wide out here off the tight end formation. And what we're going to get here is we're going to get power. So what you're going to get is the guard and the H-back are going to pull here. So, when you get this pull action, because where they're pulling, he's pulling a kick out. I think Damon Wilson's the one out here, and he should be actually trying to fit off the double teams that are taking place because the center should be blocking back. He should be getting all the way here. He should be getting here, and he should be trying to get up to him as well. I don't know if they're going to influence with him or not. I'm going down too big of a rabbit hole here, but they could influence that tight end and not block him down and let the H that's pulling get to Raylan. But, I have a feeling that they obviously have some type of play set up to where Jalen is supposed to read, because I read guards. So what happens here on Raylan Wilson's side, you'll see the guard block down, so now he fits off of that. If you get a down block by your guard, you're immediately going to fit that. I'm reading the guard pull. I want to actually fit over the top of the double team going towards Raylan and be able to help off of this. But because I guess that Quinn Ewers has the ability to pull off of this, what they're saying is, okay, we're going to call whoever's away to this. You are actually going to fit the quarterback. But what I want to show you is just the position that he puts himself in. He's got to see that if he's a C-gap defender right here, because Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins is going down in a B-gap, he's got to be able to fit right off that down. Because if he can fit off that down and still be in good position, because you got Janelle Aguero fitting from the nickel position too right there, he's got to be able to squeeze off of that, and he should be right off the hip of where TID is right now. See that big gap that he's left right there? So now when he tries to spill down the line of scrimmage, he's got a lot longer to go. Now think about it. If he was fitting right off TID right now, he's hip to hip with him. You can see, look how much he has to redirect to get to the running back, and still makes a great play from the backside right there. But because of this, he is putting himself at a disadvantage because he's too wide. And I don't know if that's just from his favorable technique that he does at the defensive end position because he's so used to running the hoop, but he's got to be able to take those shuffle steps and fit right off TID's left ass cheek so that he can get down the line of scrimmage a lot better and be more efficient. And that's the reason why I think from this position, playing stand-up, no stem, no stunt, no blitz, I just don't think this is what fits him in the NFL. I think what fits him in the NFL is being able to move him around from a 5 technique to a 7 technique, 6, 9 technique, and being able to run him off the edge, either weak side or the strong side, and being able to let him play and get to the ball and wreak havoc that way. But, just a poor fit, it could have been a lot better for him.
All right, great breakdown as always, Coach. Who do you see? And maybe if you haven't looked at this, it's fine. I didn't prep you for it, so I'm just throwing it off the cuff. Is there a team that you see, Jalen Walker maybe fitting into better than others in the league? Because I think there's a lot of the mock drafts are predicting him to the Panthers, to Carolina with the 8th pick. We're seeing that pop up a good bit. There's a few mock drafts that are putting him in the top 10, but anybody that puts him in the top 10 is generally going to the Panthers. Do you have any opinion on, any of the NFL teams that he might be a good fit for?
I'm not really sure because of the schematics of what, some of the defenses run. But, if they don't take him in the top 10, they're crazy because I think he's top 10 talent. I really hope that they utilize him the right way. You think about Nolan Smith at Philadelphia, think about the past Super Bowl that you just watched. I mean, Nolan Smith is actually smaller than Jalen Walker, but yet seems to play almost 2 times his size. It's amazing how he plays off the edge. Whatever team gets him needs to utilize him in that same way. So when I think about all the teams that are possibly there, I mean, you would love to see him, thrive by being in the right scheme. And instead of them taking him on just talent alone, being able to put him in a scheme that's going to make him successful. Yeah. Thomas Davis, if you think about it, going back in the day, I'm kind of going way off kilt here. Yeah. But, you think about him, playing for the Carolina Panthers, but when he played at Georgia, if I'm not mistaken, he didn't play as much at linebacker level. I think didn't he play more safety when he was at Georgia?
He played a good bit of both, but yeah.
I thought, because when I saw him basically be, go to the NFL, he was more at that second level stand-up linebacker the entire time. I could have swore I remember seeing him more at safety position
he
than
played
linebacker.
safety and linebacker. I think some of that may have been, I mean, that was the early 2000s. Some of that may have
Yeah.
been the scheme that they were running
True,
back then too.
true. And that's the thing about it. I don't think that it's impossible that he could do that. I think it's just going to be a matter of time because it's just like with anything else. I know Shu was trying to coach him up every day because that was the question we had at the beginning of the year was what are we going to do with Jalen Walker? He's going to have to play that hybrid position, which is what he did pretty much all year long. He was at the stand-up backer, walked down. He was playing as a stand-up backer, as you saw there in the cut. And he also played on the edge a lot at that jack position. So I just think whoever does get him is going to definitely have, I don't say a steal because if he's going in the top 10 of the draft, he's definitely needed, but whoever does get him needs to fit the scheme of their defense very well. And I think whoever's running a 3-4 scheme similar to what Georgia runs is going to be very successful with 11 or whatever number he's going to be in the NFL on that defense.
Yeah. And I'll say, I think the Panthers, I think they do run a similar scheme. I think the one thing with the Panthers is their two stand-up linebackers that they use mostly this year in that kind of Nolan Smith position were Jadeveon Clowney and that DJ Wanham guy out of South Carolina. And both of those guys they're around, I think weight-wise, they're probably in 250, 260, but they're both, 6'5", pretty long. And so I'll be interested to see if Jalen Walker does go to the Panthers, if they, because they do use that there, and it's interesting because like their linebackers are long, right? So they're like 6'5", 250, 260, but their defensive end is like 6'3", 320. So he's like a bit like, so it is that kind of 3-4 scheme. And so Jalen Walker really fits in well there. If you think about what they're considering a defensive end in Carolina is a bigger, just one of those true like big bodies, because they put that stand-up linebacker on the outside of the guy. So it'll be interesting to see where Walker ends up. I'm excited to see where all these dogs end up, and we're going to be back, and we're going to talk about it, Coach. We're going to break down combine. I love this time of year with the NFL combine.
Yes,
because I love the opportunity of seeing guys who have worked their whole lives, who have this goal, and they get an opportunity to go out and try to make something happen for themselves. And I love it. Yep. I love those things like Javon Bullard a couple years ago where he said they were asking him how fast he was going to run. And somebody said, he said, I guess we'll see tomorrow, and he went out and ran, 4.4 or whatever it was. So I love those guys that just have ooze confidence, but also just have an opportunity to create value for themselves. So we'll be back. We'll be talking about that. We'll do some research and see where we might think some of these guys fit. But subscribe, follow Coach Hayes at Coach Hayes Huddle, at Coach Hayes HUDL. Subscribe to the show. Follow us on Twitter at Jon Tweet Sports and at Coach Hayes HUDL. And we will see y'all next time.